let's move on here to one of the more intriguing units for the Dolphins. I'm intentionally saving offensive line for last, by the way, because that's going to be a long conversation.
Oh, here's where fun begins. Like the
yeah.
next three
man, let me tell you
position
something.
groups
Yeah.
are by far the most fun.
Yes, and we're going to go to wide receiver right now. Now, Dolphins re-signed Jalen Waddle. They drafted Malik Washington in the 6th round last year. Those two guys, I think, are presumably keepers for the Dolphins. Outside of those two guys, it gets a little cloudy. It gets a little murky, even with Tyreek Hill. So I'm going to start with you actually here, Anthony. How do you see this shaking out?
Well, we got to do something because we're losing half of our receiver room. I mean,
we have
Craycraft and Barrios, who have been with us for the past 2 years, are both free agents yet again. We brought in some guys this year to kind of fill holes. Eskridge, Dubose, and Schwartz. Dubose and Schwartz, unfortunately, didn't play very much. We saw Eskridge quite a bit at the end of the season, though.
Great
and then,
teamer.
Yeah, his special teamer, yeah. And we just signed Tyreek Black, who was on our practice squad, to a futures contract. So we have at least the rights to Tyreek Black. I don't even know who that is, but I just figured I'd mention it.
No idea.
Nope, never heard of him.
So outside of that, we obviously have Tyreek and we have Jalen, who are our two superstars. We got Malik Washington, who came in hot last year, 6th round pick. That's fantastic.
Don't forget Taj.
We got Taj Washington, who was a 7th round pick. Unfortunately, got injured in the preseason last year, so we didn't get to see him. And then we have a 4th round pick by the name of Eric Ezukanma, who is somehow still on this team, even though he has done next to nothing for us. Other than his rookie season,
hopes for that guy too.
His rookie season, he put up one of the best preseason performances we've seen out of a Dolphins wide receiver. Yeah. He just disappeared. So undoubtedly, I know this conversation is going to go towards the trading of Tyreek Hill. I just know you guys. I know the conversations we've had in the background. So I am going to let you all do that because I looked up some names that I think would be nice fillers in the event that did in fact happen, or even if it didn't. I got to say that over in Washington, they took everybody's trash and turned it into treasure this year. If you look at this roster, it is guys almost exclusively that no other team wanted. And the guy that stood out to me a ton, and it stood out to me when he was in Atlanta as well, and it always confused me how he didn't get more of a chance, was Alameda Zacchaeus. Not only does he have an extremely fun and difficult name to say, but he played decently well too. So his name stood out to me as a guy, and I'm just going to go through some free agents. We draft a wide receiver every single year, so I know we're going to draft one. I don't know what round we're going to draft one. It really depends on if we trade Tyreek or not. I think if we trade Tyreek, we take one a little earlier, maybe 2nd round. If we don't, we're looking at another later round. Maybe we have 2 3rd-round picks, I think, so maybe we use the 2nd, 3rd-round pick on that. But the other guys just in the free agency landscape that stood out to me that are not named T. Higgins, because, again, I know that others are going to talk plenty about T. DeMarcus Robinson.
Who could that be?
This I never know which way you are. This guy.
He's somewhere.
So listen, DeMarcus Robinson with the LA Rams. He's put up some good tape there. I think he can be just a fine wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. And that's important to point out is that's what I'm looking at these guys as, is wide receiver 3s, wide receivers 4s. Because I think if you trade a guy like Tyreek Hill, I would hope you get something in return, or you have a game plan on how to get another wide receiver 1/2 in there. I know that Jalen Waddle was the 6th overall pick in the draft, and he should be able to take over wide receiver 1 duties, but he hasn't exactly been that 6th overall pick in the draft that you expect him to be. So that's the one pause I put on the Hill trade is I don't want to go back to having no passing game. That's really where I'm sticking. So I looked at DeMarcus. I looked at Zacchaeus. Darius Slayton, who seemingly is like a forever New York Giant, and you can't escape them. I'd love to. I thought he played really well for a few seasons. And then how about our boy Mac Hollins? Let's bring Hollins back. I always love this guy. I don't know why everybody.
But he doesn't wear shoes, guys.
Who cares?
He wears shoes for on the field.
I threw Mac Hollins in especially for you guys. I knew you would have a nice reaction to that. So yeah.
I love Mac Hollins. He comes up with clutch cash after clutch cash. You saw it with the Bills this year. I love that name.
In that game against the Chiefs, he was their best receiver.
Yes, he
was. What do you have? 6 receptions for over 70?
He crushed it, dude.
Yeah. Kind of a weird dude, but look, when he's on the field, he balls.
Kind of exactly what we were missing this year. Fast and tall.
Yeah. And another thing another good thing about Matt Collins is even if he's not on the offense, even if he's not playing offense, he plays a good special teams. So he's a very versatile guy. Drafted by the Eagles, actually.
To Josh's point, that's what I was aiming for, tall guys who are physical.
Yeah.
And the only guy I think I named who isn't is Darius Slayton. But Robinson, Hollins, Zacchaeus, those are all tall physical players that I think would be a nice change of pace from what our normal guys are. Slayton is my guy if our team is just dedicated to sticking with the same size profile at receiver, then I can see a Slayton coming in.
And that's another thing. I think, we talked about this with the backup quarterback position. I think this is Chris Greer, Mike McDaniels all season to kind of right the wrongs and, maybe correct some of the mistakes they've made in the past. So when we say the Dolphins don't really have a big physical wide receiver who can go up and get a 50-50 ball for you, this is kind of what we're looking for this all season. So I think I'm going to throw this to you, Josh.
This is true as well, but I didn't think it would be a realistic ad, to be
honest.
Yeah.
All right, so fellas, buckle up, right?
All right.
So I am a huge Tyreek fan, but I think it's time to let go. I've been a very big advocate for trading Tyreek Hill this offseason, right? He clearly, I don't respect the player that checks out at halftime and refuses to go in. Sorry, once you do that, you're done, in my opinion. Like, there's no coming back from that. I understand we were out of the playoffs. I understand we were losing. I understand all of it, and you don't want to risk your body. But at the end of the day, you are a competitor. You are on the field. You do your 111, right? And Tyreek Hill did not do his 111. Not to mention, he's one of, if not the highest paid player on our team. So, sorry, fellas. So I think, there's a lot to be said there for, is he the right fit? Is he good for the locker room? What can we get for him, right? Players, as they hit a certain age, as they hit a certain wear and tear on their bodies, they are a depreciating value from a business standpoint. And I think we will not get a return anywhere close to what we dished out for him. I think, and we've said it on the show, what he gave us in the time he's been with us, phenomenal. Worth every single cent. Every single pick, every single cent. 2 back-to-back 1,700 yards receiving years, and a shit show that was last year, right? With all kinds of things that went wrong. Now, if we trade him, and depending on how it goes and what time of the year and all that other stuff, we will get a substantial amount of money back, right? The few names outside of the draft, and I think that's where we probably go, right? To fill this need in particular. But one name that I keep going back to, yes, Chris Godwin was on my list. You have T. Higgins, who is like my dream candidate. I think he's a perfect fit for this roster. He's tall, he's fast. I'm not saying we can, but if we could do maybe a swap 1-for-1, give him the same money, I'd be fine with it, right? That money's already accounted for. See ya, right? But that's a pipe dream. That's not going to happen. One name that I went back to over and over and over again was Joshua Palmer from the Chargers.
Ooh,
okay,
right? Big, fast, clean route runner, nothing spectacular, but just a Swiss Army knife, good across the board. Again, has some injury history.
Josh is dying. This will just be a moment.
I'm just dying a little bit. I apologize, guys. But Josh Palmer was Elijah Moore, Chris Godwin, were the names that I kept going. So maybe Amari Cooper, if the Bills let him go, or don't re-sign him, maybe bring him in on a 1 or 2 year deal, play in South Beach, save some money on taxes, come enjoy South Beach as your career.
Runs great routes.
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing when looking at this team at this position on this team is the redundancy. And I can't stand redundancy. I understand, a team has an identity, but when you have a $70 million wide receiver as your wide receiver 1, who's 5'2", and you have
5'2".
and Tyreek Hill, and who's very good. It's not a slide on him.
What does Kyler Murray have to do with this, John?
and you just paid Waddle, tens of millions of dollars. I think he's averaging, was it 15, 17 million a year, maybe a little more. I can't remember. Probably closer to 20. Who's also 5'2". I mean, there's redundancies, and that's not a slide on the player. That's not a slide on their talent. I think they're both wide receiver 1 quality players. My thing is what happens when the team learns how to defend that, which we saw this year. We have no one, not even our tight end, who I'm a huge fan of, is tall. Nobody's tall. Nobody can go up and get that one-handed, two-handed, 50-50 ball in the back of the end zone while keeping your feet down because you have mass, right? So even if the defense, even if the safeties or the cornerbacks put their hands on you, you have enough mass to run through it, to run through that block, to run through the contact. We don't have that. So Joshua Palmer, Amari Cooper should the Bills not bring him back? I think they should bring him back. If I was the Bills, I would want him back. And there's a ton of people in the draft who I'm a big fan of, and we'll get to those later.
All right. I like those names. I'm going to toss out this name that Brian gave us, Keenan Allen. I like that name a lot too.
Mm-hmm. I
Keenan
think he
Allen,
goes back though. I think he goes back.
Yeah, I think he probably does too. But talking about a guy who runs great routes, he's a bigger guy. Not always the healthiest, but still,
Perfect Chris Greer guy.
Yeah, but still a guy worth kicking the tires on if he becomes available.
There's a lot of big names available this offseason.
Yeah.
I know I put out a bunch of small name guys, but there was a lot of big names on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even mention DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. Talk about a guy
Johnson,
who win 50-50 balls.
Stephon Diggs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a ton of them, man.
Deontay Johnson's career is over, I would bet.
I know.
Yeah, I don't want Deontay Johnson in this locker room.
Taylor. Not enough, man.
Taylor, what are your so first and foremost, are you a fan of trading Tyreek Hill? And if you are, what are your options to replace him?
I know I gave the offensive season jockstrap, but still I'm kind of 50-50 on it. I know he came out and explained his, let's just call it an outburst at the end of this season with his I'm out stuff. And it seems like he is at least verbally committed to wanting this team to change its identity. And there is something of value in that. And there is something of value in Tyreek Hill being a member of this team. Josh, you mentioned the redundancy, and there's a bit of identity in what they do, both Waddle and Hill, as being those Ferraris on the outside. But I'm kind of with you. I think we're at that point to where the offense does need to change. And honestly, we just need to get rid of the money that's being spent in this position room, especially to just one player. So I would be up for trading Tyreek Hill, getting what we can for him. And really what I would do then is draft somebody. This is going to sound wild, especially. I understand. We will get to the offensive line. We need to mess with
I hope you're going to say who I think you're about to say.
But we need to spend premium draft capital on the wide receiver position if we trade Tyreek.
Say his name, Taylor.
I'm not going to say his name.
Come on.
Because
honestly, people I
don't think it's who Josh thinks it is. It's not McMillan.
Nope. Okay.
For me, it would be, and I understand this is a little redundancy, Luther Burden is a name that I'm thinking of.
That's a great player.
Mm-hmm. He is somebody who uses motion a lot. He is both in more of a slot this year, but he's been on the outside before. I love the way that while he is small, there is something about him that's very CeeDee Lamb-like to me, and CeeDee Lamb also comes across as this Deebo Samuel kind of player. So it's in that same realm as, we could plug him anywhere kind of thing. And he plays with some physicality to him. So Luther Burden is the name that I would really like us to look at. But when it comes to just aside from the Tyreek of it all, aside from if we keep him, if we trade him, all that stuff, no matter what, we need to get depth.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have brought up a lot of great names. Some of the comments have brought up a lot of great names. The big problem I have with some of the more well-known names, let's just say that, is we don't have the money for that. And if we're trying to change the way this roster is constructed, then we shouldn't be spending that money in the same position room as we just paid Waddle. So I'm bringing up names kind of like a Demarcus Robinson from the Rams. Somebody who was pretty reliable for the Rams this past year. And Josh Palmer, who said Josh Palmer? Was it you, Josh? Yes. That was another name that I was thinking of as well. I think that was a really good shout.
Mhm.
And also, talked about Commanders earlier. How about Jamison Crowder? Talk about a very cheap name.
He's been
Yeah.
invisible for so many years. When his name pops up, I get surprised. I'm like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been in the league so long. I saw him play last week for the Commanders. I was like, whoa, he's still on the team. Also, you have the Mac Hollins, you got the Trent Sherfields. If you want to bring them back, there is some familiarity there, at least organizationally. So, no matter what, you have to change the way this depth is on the roster at this position. Because I love Malik Washington. I just don't want to go into the season next year where we're putting all our eggs in the basket of Malik Washington as wide receiver 2, and then we look at the same basically room that we had last year at wide receiver, and we're sitting there going, well, I hope Malik Washington outperforms where we drafted him this year again, or we're going to be really looking bad.
And the problem with that is again, even if you trade Tyreek and you go in, again, it's small guy in Waddle, small guy in Washington, small guy in Taj, and they're all decent players, right? But I do want to say this, and I know we haven't, we did a show on it before, and we probably cover it at some point in the offseason, maybe post-draft, but this team has a bunch of levers that we can pull, a bunch of options that we can make to open up a crap load of cap space without sacrificing the future. I mean, yeah, you're pushing some money down the hill, but it's not as much as people think. I mean, you look at our cap situation now, you're like, dude, are we going to be able to sign anyone? Because we're over the cap. We have no money. There are post-June 1st cuts. There are trades. There are levers you can pull in certain contracts. Now, with those levers comes a commitment to said player, like a Bradley Chubb, like a Zach Sealer, who we can re-sign and maybe lower the cap and give him a signing bonus and push that money down because we need to re-sign him. He's one of my big, we'll get to that on the defensive side, but there's a lot of players that we can re-up, renegotiate, pull levers. The Tua contract, we could free up, I think it was like $30 to $40 million without truly affecting, without blowing everything out of the water in 2 years, where we're like the New Orleans Saints. I mean, again, that means we're committing to Tua, and there are some people that probably love that. Me. There are some people that probably hate it. Most other Dolphins fans. So, there are options that we can do to open up cap space where we can then maybe go after those tier 2 type players instead of having to settle for the tier 3s and 4s.
I think we're kind of treating.
I was just going to say the worry I have about that is what you brought up about the Saints. That's what I don't want the Dolphins to become, and we are getting very close. We're arguably there, but we're getting very close to being in that realm.
Oh, we're not even close to the Saints. Taylor.
What realm? The Saints? You're. I don't mean to disagree with you, but that's crazy talk.
The Saints are 88 million over the cap right now.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near that, man.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, I just don't want to be in that spot to where, we're just going to kick that can down the road again. Let's invest in the same positions that we are not really winning with, hoping it will work this time.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying there, Taylor. I think, and if the Dolphins do move on from Tyreek Hill, I think the wide receiver room as a whole is going to take up less of the cap space, just because, and that means T. Higgins is probably out. That means a guy like Chris Godwin. Yeah.
Marquise Brown, those kind of players are done.
But let me toss a couple of names out here to you guys. One is a free agent, and I think we can kind of get him on a 1-year prove-it deal because he is often injured, but his skill set does match what the Dolphins need on their offense right now, and that name is Mike Williams.
That's a good name.
Oft injured, but he had some good years with the Chargers, some good moments with the Chargers, not so much with the Jets this year, not so much with the Steelers this year, but he's a guy that I think can wing you those 50-50 balls. And I don't think he comes in and immediately becomes your wide receiver too. I think he comes in and earns playing time, earns more opportunities on this roster. And I think that kind of works in his favor because we don't want him on the field an awful lot anyway because of how often he gets injured. Another name, and this is kind of one of my man crushes as far in the draft, is Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. He's been tearing up Senior Bowl practices this
sure
week.
Has been.
And
stud.
a big bodied guy who knows how to exploit zones. Very savvy, great hands. 6'3", 225 pounds.
Runs like a 4.42 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I think we can get a guy like that in the second round. Potentially, maybe even the third. I don't know. But if we trade
that at all.
But if we, what's that?
Oh, I was just saying I don't hate that at all.
Now if we trade Tyreek Hill and get a little more draft capital, maybe we can trade up for a guy like Jaden Higgins.
How about we just cut the noise, trade up in the first round, and take Toria McMillan?
Yeah.
Just pull a Ditka and trade the whole draft up.
Just
and
everyone.
We're done.
Ricky
Let's play
Williams.
some golf. Let's get that.
F them picks. Now, I do
so-
want to say one more thing, if I can, before we get off of the wide receivers.
Yes,
I do think I would like to see River Craycraft come back.
I would too.
Obviously, depending on the value, right? It needs to make sense because he's never on the field. But his chemistry with Tua is something that I just don't think you can let walk out the door unless he prices himself out of what we feel comfortable paying with. And another thing is, remember, every single time we're doing roster analysis, that how they build contracts is they build it so that we can pull levers down the road to free up money to make moves without sacrificing the future. So as fans, now I'm not some math guy, I'm not some contract guru. I just know what I listen to and know what the research I do and what I read. How we built out the contracts, like Waddles, like Sealers, like Tuas, like Hills, is that there are on the defensive side, what's his face, Chubbs. We can pull levers, we can move on and not sacrifice the future. Unlike the Saints, where if they cut a player, now they have $60 million for that one player because they kicked it all down to the final year of the contract. So we're in better shape than it seems like we're in. I'll just say that.
Yeah. And I agree with you there, but I still think we need to be smart about who we give money to this offseason.
Of course, 100%.
No Teron Armstead contracts. No gigantic, make this guy the top paid player at his position type of contracts.
Mm-hmm.
We got to be a little smarter than that this offseason. We don't have stupid money to spend. I'm gonna, before we get off wide receivers, I want to ask you guys one more question. Should we trade Tyreek Hill? What can we get for Tyreek Hill?
Oh, Jesus.
That's one thing I've been kind of grappling with since the offseason began, because I know that's certainly on the table. I know that, Brian Wilson in the chat, he wants the Dolphins to trade Tyreek Hill to
I'll trade him to New England for their first round pick this year and Joe Milton.
Done and done.
But
I know Brian wants the Dolphins to trade him to New England. Don't know if that's going to happen, but what do you guys realistically see the Dolphins getting for Tyreek Hill? I honestly don't know. So Anthony, enlighten me here.
Yeah, I realistically think it's a high second if you're gonna move him. I do think that you want to target teams with young quarterbacks who don't yet have that alpha receiver. We don't want to trade him to New England, but New England's a good example of a team like that. But yeah, he's in his 30s, and that's I know wide receivers don't hit that cliff like most positions hit that cliff in their 30s, but that your trade value is a little diminished at that point. So I would be happy I would want 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, at least. So if we could get 2 seconds or a second and a third, or maybe it's a second and 2/3 or second, third, fourth, something like that. I would definitely not be happy if we didn't at least get a second in that move. If they end up trading him for 2/3, I don't think that's worth it.
Okay. You're more optimistic than I was. I was thinking like a third and a fourth. Yeah, third and a fourth or something like that. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
None of us know. That's why you asked what I would want. I don't know what we could get. What I would want is at least a second. Yeah.
Well, Taylor, what do you think we could get, man?
I'm with Anthony. What I would want is a second. I think that's
okay.
Fair considering his age, considering the contract. The team that I keep thinking about every time we get into this Tyreek Hill trade, Raiders.
Yeah.
I kept thinking that too, man, but they don't have a quarterback. So I'm like, unless they draft Shador or something, then maybe.
You actually want to turn Tyreek Hill loose in Las Vegas, man?
Please. Yeah. What could go
Sure,
wrong?
he's not on the Dolphins.
True.
He's a grown man. He can do what he wants.
Josh, what do you think? What
Yeah,
can we realistically get for him?
I think when looking at trades, you got to understand that whatever team we're trading him to, the reason we're not going to get comparable value to what we traded is because they're going to have to give him a new contract, right?
Yeah.
And so that diminishes what our return could be. I think Anthony Taylor, you guys hit it right out of the park. I think, a 2 would be amazing. Maybe a 2 this year, a 2 next year, or a 2 and a 3 this year and something next year and some pick swaps, or a 2 this year, a 3 next year, and a player that we like. I mean, that's the realm that we're going to be living in.
Okay.
But with that comes the cap relief as well. So where the value that we'll be receiving is a little on the meh side, or like, okay, well, we gave up a 1, a 2, or 1, 2 2s, a 3, a 7, a 5, a 9, a 14, a car, so a bag of jujubes and a Porsche to get them, right? We're only getting a bag of popcorn and some Twizzlers, which is fine, but we're also getting the distraction out of the building. We're allowing Waddle to come into the position that I think he deserves to be in, and we're getting the cap relief on the end.
We better walk away from this trade with a bag of jujubes. That's all I have to say about that.
You know who I would look at, actually? And I just had to look up who the young quarterbacks in the league are because my brain is on Dolphins right now.
Washington.
No, because I think Terry McLaurin's really good. I think Indianapolis. I think Michael Pittman's really good, but they have nobody on the side of him. These guys are on the hot seat, like as hot as it can possibly get. That GM has like 6 games to prove he can still do it before he gets the can. Like,
sounds familiar.
I mean, talk about somebody who's desperate. They desperately want to get their their young quarterback some weapons. They desperately want to win some games. They desperately need a wide receiver. I mean, Indianapolis isn't a bad target to try to move him to. If you would agree to that.
I know it's stupid, but what about Kansas City? Send them back home, right? No. I mean, again,
we can't be helping Kansas City. I know
that's such a Kansas City move, though, to trade a second back to the team that gave you 2 or 3 firsts for the guy. Like,
I'm just saying. I don't love it, but I mean, the NFL wants them to win anyway, so might as well, pay the pauper.
That's what they do. Teams like
pump
that.
The brakes on that narrative.
That's exactly what they do.
All right, let's move on from wide receiver here, guys. That we're going to be talking about Tyreek Hill and trades and wide receivers a lot in the upcoming weeks. That's a position group that I think is going to be in flux all off season. So there's going to be plenty more conversations about wide receiver.